Good afternoon, distinguished guests and esteemed panelists. My name is Simon Moili. I'll be your MC for today's panel discussion. Today, our distinguished speakers and panelists will explore the nexus of gender, climate, conflict, and peace building. We hope that today's conversation will provide insights into the essential roles women occupy in promoting resilience, peace, and security amid growing climate challenges. We are particularly looking forward to having such a great set of panelists from diverse backgrounds who will delve deeper into the topic and share their perspectives on this emerging issue. To begin our program, I'm pleased to introduce Her Excellency Dagmar Schmidt, the Ambassador of Switzerland to the Republic of Korea, to deliver her welcoming remarks. Please join me in welcoming Ambassador Schmidt.
Honorable members of Parliament and members of the Diplomatic Corps, dear colleagues, dear guests, ladies and gentlemen. It's a very great honor for me to welcome you all to the panel Women at the Nexus of Climate, Conflict and Peace Building. We have organized this panel this afternoon as part of the visit of the President of the Swiss Senate or Council of States, Her Excellency Eva Herzog, to the Republic of Korea. She is joined by two other Swiss parliamentarians, Honorable Andrea Caroni, Vice President of the Council of States, and Honorable Erich Ettlin, a member of the Council of States. I'm especially pleased that we have been able to partner with UN Women as co-organizer of this panel. I extend my gratitude to Lee Jeongshim, the director of UN Women's Center of Excellence for Gender Equality, and to Lee Ah-jung, who oversees external relations at the Seoul office, for their outstanding collaboration. We are very grateful to have the expertise of Nourul Mohamed Rashid from the UN Women Regional Office in Bangkok on today's topic and welcome her in Seoul. As our guest of honor, I would like to first welcome His Excellency Ban Ki-moon, the 8th Secretary General of the United Nations. The theme of the panel is closely tied to his work, empowering women and combating climate change. Under his leadership, UN Women was established, the international community adopted the landmark Paris Agreement, and the UN launched the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. I'm very grateful to Honorable Baek Sang-yu, President of the War Memorial Organization, for hosting this event. In this month, he has also provided space for an exhibition highlighting the vital importance of the Geneva Conventions adopted by the international community 75 years ago to protect civilians. Today's event is also a side event to the exhibition in the War Memorial, Digital Dilemmas, Civilians at Heart, which I invite you to visit if you haven't yet. The Korean Red Cross was one of our most important Korean partners in organizing the exhibition. I would like to personally thank its president, Kim Chol-soo, for the close collaboration over the past months and for his intervention today, which adds further emphasis to the theme of women, peace, and security. I'm also delighted that Honorable Kang Kyung-suk, a member of Korea's National Assembly, has agreed to participate in the panel discussion, making a valuable contribution to strengthening parliamentary dialogue between Switzerland and Korea. The core of our exhibition was provided by the International Committee of the Red Cross, the ICRC, which co-organized it with the embassy. Special thanks go to Jamila Hamami, the head of mission of the ICRC in Seoul. We look forward to the panel contribution from Marwa Shaleba from the East Regional Office of the ICRC, who has joined us from Beijing. Thank you very much for this. On the occasion of this exhibition, we have also taken the opportunity to showcase Switzerland's priority as a non-permanent member of the UN Security Council. When Switzerland chaired the Council last May 2023, the then president of the Swiss Confederation led a session on the topic protection of civilians. This year, during its October presidency, Switzerland focused on sustainable peacebuilding in New York. The current president of the Swiss Confederation, Viola Amherd, hosted a signature event on women, peace and security, which notably is also a priority for Korea's UN Security Council membership. The third thematic priority of Switzerland's mandate in the Security Council, which concludes at the end of this year, is addressing the impact of climate change on security. I would like to thank Stephanie Speck from the Green Climate Fund for agreeing to participate in our panel today, thereby shedding light on the aspect of climate change in the nexus of climate, conflict, and peacebuilding. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I thank all the speakers and panelists that, through today's discussion, we can contribute to giving an emerging theme of the Women, Peace, Security agenda the attention it deserves. I hope we can also bring focus to the active role of women in peace building in a changing environment. Our goal this afternoon is ultimately to gain more insight into women at the nexus of climate, conflict, and peace building, and to clarify the interrelations at play. Dear public, I'm so happy that you're all here, and thank you for being here this afternoon and for showing your interest in this topic. Allow me especially also to welcome some Swiss citizens who have also the opportunity to meet the Swiss parliamentary delegation at this occasion. I wish you all an inspiring afternoon. Thank you very much. Kamsahamnida.
Thank you, Ambassador. Next, we are privileged to have with us a distinguished lineup of speakers to deliver congratulatory remarks. Please join me in welcoming His Excellency Ban Ki-moon, the 8th Secretary General of the United Nations, President of the Global Green Growth Institute, and Chairman of the Ban Ki-moon Foundation for a Better Future.
Thank you for your introduction. Her Excellency Eva Herzog, President of the Swiss Council of States, Her Excellency Dagmar Schmidt, Tartagli, Ambassador of Switzerland to the Republic of Korea, Dr. Jeongshim, Director of the UN Women's Center of Excellence for Gender Equality, Honorable Baek Sung-ju, President of the War Memorial Organization, Dr. Kim Chol-soo, President of the Korean National Red Cross, Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. Good afternoon. I'm honored to join all of you at the War Memorial of Korea to express my warm congratulations on the occasion of this timely panel discussion on women at the nexus of climate, conflict, and peace building. And it's my privilege to speak to you at this vital juncture, one where elevating gender equality, expanding climate action, and empowering peace building is critical for all. Indeed, we are facing interconnected challenges and stand on the precipice of a period of pronounced change, one with profound implications for our societies, planet, and the future. My gratitude goes to the Embassy of Switzerland and the UN Women's Center of Excellence in holding this session to promote action in these spheres. Now more than ever, we need global solutions underpinned with cooperation solidarity to empower the women, the peace builders of both today and tomorrow, in order to rise to the occasion to ensure a sustainable and peaceful future. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, climate change remains our single biggest threat to peace and prosperity. Unfortunately, the climate change agenda is not progressing fast enough or nearly as fast as the cascading and intensifying impacts of the climate crisis itself. Indeed, our planet is on fire, both literally and figuratively, as the climate crisis deepens with the record-shattering temperatures, burning wildfires, and raging floods. In this connection, acting now to urgently fight climate change must be the overarching task of our lifetimes. The Paris Climate Change Agreement provides us with our best hope to take action against the dire climate threat to the Earth. As I repeatedly stressed, we don't have a plan B because we don't have planet B either. This word I've been repeatedly saying around the world, in Arctic, Antarctica, and many other places. At the heart of such an action, we must drastically slash carbon emission to net zero and ensure just a transition. This will improve human well-being, empower communities, and build international peace. And the role of women is absolutely critical. I hope that the women community raise your voices, and you should challenge the leaders of the world. Tell them that you make sure that this planet Earth must be sustainable and friendly to planet Earth as well as humanity. This has been my continuing agenda. I think we all join our hands on the deck together. Now, ladies and gentlemen, here is the bottom line. We know that fossil fuels are a dead end for the Earth. It's a rich biodiversity and humanity. The science has been making it clear, and reminders of the impact of the expanding climate crisis are all around us. On our TV screens, in dramatic cell phone videos, out our windows. But there is another path. The urgent, just, and equitable transition is vital to avoid the worst of the climate impacts, realize the UN Sustainable Development Goals, build the peace, and empower women. Indeed, accelerating the green transition is the most crucial way to combat climate change while also boosting sustainable growth, enhancing equity and inclusion, and synergizing SDG targets related to food and land systems, and refocusing our efforts on implementing SDG 5, which calls for achieving gender equality and empowering all women and girls, is critical as it is a true game-changing enabler of all the other 16 SDGs. Empowering women and girls and promoting gender equality is essential to solving the world's biggest interconnected challenges. This includes achieving the UN SDGs, resolving conflicts, and taking climate action. As UN Secretary General, I devoted much of my time and energy and resources and energy to advancing the rights of women around the world and fighting for gender equality. From my very first day at the UN to my last, this was my guiding priority. In this connection, I launched the UN Women in 2010 to ensure the organization, United Nations, does more to deliver on gender equality and women's empowerment. And I appointed the UN's very first female peacekeeping commander, Major General Kristin Lund of Norway. Let me tell about this story. When I appointed Michelle Bachelet, the former president of Chile, as the head of UN Women, nobody objected because she was already president of Chile. So everybody accepted. Then I went down to some real sections. I wanted to appoint a woman general for a commanding general of peacekeeping operations. A lot of my senior advisors, particularly male, they came, SG, how can you appoint a woman general for UN peacekeeping operations? So I told them that, well, Norwegian government has given her 2 stars on her shoulders. I don't think they might have given her just for nothing 2 stars. Then still they were not convinced. No, women cannot command all these men, UN peacekeepers. So let's wait 6 months. If you have the same things, same idea that she's not enough, not doing well, then I will change. Then I gave her 6-month mandate just to show your leadership. And she's still now, until now. How many years now? It's 14 years later, she is working in different missions as commanding general of UN peacekeeping operations. So there are many, many issues. Then I wanted to test another area, the police chief. I appointed a Swedish lady as a police chief, head of police. Again, they just pushed me a lot. So let us see how this Swedish government is not just nothing. They are very important member state of the United Nations. Then she was very well welcomed later. So this is the way I really wanted to expand the role of women at the United Nations. And I've been speaking to many political leaders. How many women parliamentarians, how many women ministers do you have in your government? So they say, smiling all the times, because when they do not have proper answer, they smile. When I was addressing General Assembly, there were many presidents, prime ministers, ministers were sitting in the General Assembly hall. I checked all data, how many ministers, women, how many, all these senior level parliamentarians, women are there. Then I realized that in 10 countries, there was not a single woman both in the cabinet and ministry. So I announced, among you, there are 10 countries. I will not name the country, but I will surely go and visit you and point out this one if you don't change your role. By doing this, I was able to employ many capable women in UN system. This is what I have been doing. So I sincerely hope that the Korean government and many other, I even spoke to Korean Parliament when I was in 2012. I came back to Korea proudly as Secretary General of the UN. I was invited by the Parliament. At that time, the former President Park Geun-hye was a member of Parliament. I saw very few, so I addressed General Assembly. I sincerely hope that Korean government, that Korea will have at least 20% of women at the National Assembly. It hasn't happened this year only. When new parliament was convened, this year only, they have met 20% of women parliamentarians. that is not enough, but that's reality, and I hope there will be more and more. In any way, it took almost 12 years. I did it 2012, now 2024. They met this criteria. I hope there will be 30% or 40%. That's what I'd like to tell you. In any way, bottom line is that women's rights are absolutely central to the three defining pillars of the UN: peace and security, sustainable development, and human rights. This is a matter of human rights, as well as each and every one of other 16 UN SDGs. But if we continue to hold back half of the world's population, it's simply impossible to reach our full potential on these, meeting the targets of three pillars. So we must do more for women and girls everywhere to realize a sustainable future. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, now more than ever, we must illuminate a vibrant new pathway to confront the multiple challenges we are facing today. This is true in regard to ensuring sustainable development and leaving no one behind, protecting biodiversity, building peaceful communities, taking climate action, and advancing prosperity for our future generations. As such, it is essential that we join together to accelerate progress on the UN Sustainable Development Goals, expand women's empowerment, and spur climate action. And key stakeholders like yourselves, who are addressing the climate-gender conflict nexus, are indispensable for such effort. To do so, we need a cooperative approach where we join together to catalyze all societal partners to mobilize our world for enhanced SDGs, peace, and climate action. Today's global challenges are unprecedented, so our response must be also equally unprecedented too. This is a pivotal year and decade for both humanity and our troubled planet. But I have no doubt that you can seize this opportunity and brighten a path to this luminous future, one that is sustainable, peaceful, and inclusive for all. With that, I conclude my remarks by reiterating my heartfelt congratulations on the success of this Women at the Nexus of Climate, Conflict, and Peacebuilding's panel discussions. Ladies and gentlemen, let us try our best effort, join hands together on the deck to realize a sustainable world where women and girls will have their full capacity, demonstrating their ability to contribute to our succeeding generations. Thank you very much. Thank you. 감사합니다.
Thank you, Secretary General. Next, I would like to give the floor to Jeongshim Lee, the Director of the UN Women's Center of Excellence for Gender Equality, our gracious co-hosts for today's panel discussion. Let's welcome Ms. Lee.
His Excellency Ban Ki-moon, 8th Secretary General of the United Nations, Her Excellency Eva Herzog, President of the Swiss Council of States, the Honorable Kang Kyung-suk, Member of the National Assembly, Her Excellency Dagmar Schmidt, Ambassador of Switzerland to the Republic of Korea, Honorable Baek Sung-ju, President of the War Memorial Organization, and Mr. Kim Chol-soo, President of the Korean National Red Cross. It is a great honor to speak on behalf of UN Women, which was proudly established under the leadership of His Excellency Ban Ki-moon. Thank you very much for your powerful and encouraging remarks for advancing gender equality and the empowerment of women and girls. It's a great honor to speak on behalf of UN Women about the critical intersection of women, climate, conflict, and peace building. This occasion marks the first event in the Republic of Korea focused on this nexus. And I sincerely thank Ambassador Dagmar for her partnership in bringing attention to this vital, often overlooked issue. From UN Women's perspective, climate security extends beyond the risk of violent conflict to include economic, political, and socio-cultural dimensions. Recent developments in the UN Security Council, Peacebuilding Commission, and the UN climate change conferences have highlighted how climate change exacerbates fragility, increases tensions, and leads to instability and conflict. Women, who make up a disproportionately large proportion of the world's poor and vulnerable, are particularly affected by climate change. As first responders, they use their deep-rooted community and environmental knowledge to play key roles in climate response and recovery. Their contributions to food and water security allow them to anticipate climate-related challenges, advocate for sustainable resource management, and participate in peace building. Yet, women's significant contributions to achieving better environmental and peace outcomes remain undervalued and under-recognized. This must change. It is also essential to address the barriers women face in accessing resources and participating in decision-making processes related to peace building and climate change response and adaptation. Empowering women as agents of peace and resilience is crucial for the transformative change needed to advance global progress in climate action and gender equality. We cannot afford to overlook the role of women for the sake of peace and our planet's future. Lastly, I would like to reiterate my sincere gratitude to the Swiss Embassy for co-hosting this important discussion with the UN Women. And I hope we work more collaborative work with other embassies. Thank you very much.
Thank you to all our speakers for those meaningful opening words. Now I would like to invite all the speakers and our panelists to the stage for a group photo to commemorate this event.
Thank you so much for having us, and thank you for coming on this beautiful day. This is a very special event because I have not seen an event that specifically focuses on this nexus. So I think all of you who are gathered here, I think you're really showing the support to this emerging yet very critical agenda. So thank you so much for taking an interest on this. Now, it's my great privilege and honor to have this distinguished panelists. I'm very, very honored. And let me first introduce you to our panelists. First, Her Excellency Eva Herzog. She flew all the way from Switzerland to be with us today. Her Excellency is the President of the Swiss Council of States, the upper chamber of the Swiss Parliament. She has represented Basel-Stadt in the Council of States since 2019 and has served as the President of the Council since 2023. She's a member of the Social Democratic Party of Switzerland. She's also a member of the Foundation Board of Swiss Peace, a Swiss-based peace research institute that focuses on preventing violent conflicts, promoting peace building, and fostering dialogue in conflict zones worldwide. So this topic is very relevant to your work in that regard. And next, I have Honorable Kang Kyung-soo. She's a member of the National Assembly of the Republic of Korea. She studies special education at Ewha Women's University and has lifelong experience in promotion of inclusive policies. Ms. Kang has served various public roles related to education and served as a member of the Presidential Council of Education from 2018 to 2023. She's an active member of the Korean National Commission for UNESCO of Korea for 6 years, actually. And she was elected as a member of the National Assembly in 2024 for the Rebuilding Korea Party. So thank you very much, Honorable Kang. And I have Ms. Chabar, who is the head of the legal department of the RCRC, a regional delegation for East Asia. She has more than 12 years of professional experience in the private sector, academia, and the RCRC. She has joined RCRC in 2019, where she worked in Israel and the occupied territories, Afghanistan, as well as Libya from 2019 and 2022. And she took up this post as the head of the legal department in January 2023. So we are very grateful that you joined us. And next we have Ms. Nurul Rashid. She's the policy advisor on governance and peace and security from UN Women Office for Asia and the Pacific. Ms. Rashid has more than 30 years of professional experience in women, peace and security area. And she worked at UN Women as well as in UN headquarters as a policy and program advisor for UN Women headquarters. She worked with the UN system on integrating the women, peace and security agenda in justice and rule of law initiatives and crisis contexts. She managed the UN assistance mission for Iraq's Human Rights Office in northern Iraq and has worked in Libya and Indonesia for governance, peace, and security programming. Last but not least, I have my colleague, Ms. Stephanie Stack from the Green Climate Fund. She worked in more than 25 countries over 20 years, merging strategy, social impact, innovation, and communications to improve the lives of the most vulnerable. She worked with several heads of states, including in Somalia, Afghanistan, Iraq, and Palestine, to support governments in post-conflict environments to design and deliver state building and development initiative. And she's heading special initiatives for the Green Climate Fund based in Songdo here in the Republic of Korea. So I'm sorry for rather long introductions, but I had to do justice to the distinguished nature of our panelists. So it's truly an honor. So we are going to discuss for the next 15 minutes or so on some of the important issues that our opening speakers touched upon. And please allow me to start with Ms. Nurul Rashid from UN Women Asia Pacific Regional Office. Nurul, given your lifelong experience on the Women, Peace and Security agenda, I'd like to ask you just to set the scene for our panel discussion. For the past 3 years, in particular, UN Women has been really highlighting the importance of the Women, Peace and Security framework and approach in advancing climate, peace, and security in a way that enhances the role of communities and civil society. Why and how should we examine the nexus? And can you please share with us some case studies on women's roles in climate resilience and peace-building efforts in Asia and Pacific? Because there are some still skeptics whether this nexus is really there. So please, Nurul, why and how should we care about this?
Thank you so much, Ajung. And of course, thank you very much to our co-organizer, the Swiss Embassy. Excellencies, esteemed guests, good afternoon. So in this session, I will highlight why and how UN Women is drawing linkages between climate change and climate-induced disasters with peace and security, and why we are now convinced, and there is, of course, empirical evidence that this is a critical consideration impacting on women and girls in all contexts. Now, this is not a new topic. It has been the subject matter of discussion at the UN Security Council, at ministerial debates. We also have a number of programs at the international level by the Peacebuilding Fund, for example, that have drawn this nexus and have done a lot of programming in this regard as well. So the fifth assessment of the report of the IPCC, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, recognized this in 2014, where they say they concluded that climate change can indirectly increase risk of violent conflict by amplifying well-documented drivers of this conflict, such as poverty and economic shocks. The Women, Peace and Security agenda, there are 10 resolutions, and none of these resolutions really referred to climate change. But in 2015, in one of the resolutions, the Security Council does recognize that the peace and security landscape has changed, and we need to take into consideration as to how the Women, Peace and Security agenda will evolve to accommodate some of the changes. What are the roles of women? What will be the impact on climate change, for example, on the protection of women as well? And so this is still seriously not a new topic, but in recent years it has been picking up momentum. Now last year at the COP 28, there was a declaration at the conclusion of the COP 28 on climate relief, recovery and peace. That was the first time that the member states have actually looked at climate change in the context of peace building and conflict prevention. And they acknowledge the disproportionate and intersecting effects of climate change and conflict on vulnerable groups, and that includes women and girls, people with disabilities, older persons, displaced persons, and so on and so forth. And they do draw the linkages between climate change, fragility, and gender equality. They say that gender equality correlates with both stronger climate resilience and peace outcomes. And it is important to ensure that there are gender-responsive risk assessments with increased financial resources for adaptation, emphasizing the role of women's leadership in addressing challenges faced by community. And so it was on that sort of basis, that international commitment and acknowledgement, that we started looking at the impacts of climate change on women, and particularly in fragile settings. And we looked at it from the viewpoint of the Women, Peace and Security agenda. And this is what we've discovered. And I want to make 3 points in relation to what we have learned from our studies and our research. And some of these studies and research are available to you. You might pick up a copy at the desk as you come in. Now the first, sorry, just need to put this on the table. Thank you very much. The first point that I want to highlight is that indeed climate change has had a disproportionate impact on women and girls. The second point that I want to highlight is that women are critical agents of resilience to climate change, and this is not adequately recognized. And the third point is that the Women, Peace and Security agenda is probably the most appropriate framework for addressing climate, peace and security. Now, just on the first point, I want to give a few examples as to what we have learned through our research. First of all, we have to, we concluded that gender roles, norms, and power dynamics shape how women and girls of different backgrounds experience, respond, and contribute to insecurity in a changing climate. For example, in the Sindh and Gilgit, Baltistan regions of Pakistan, women clearly lack early warning during the 2022 floods, and they face increased household burdens in the aftermath, leading to their greater resilience on self-organized community support, as government and military-led aid distribution often overlook their needs. We noted that communities where women enjoyed stronger agency were found to be more adaptive and recovering faster. In Papua New Guinea, for example, the country experienced droughts with water shortages, lack of sanitation, and an increased incidence of communicable diseases affecting millions of households. So with households and community coping mechanisms severely depleted, escalations of intercommunal violence were recorded. Now, there were severe and disproportionate impacts on women and girls were reported as well: increase in gender-based violence, trading of sex for cash and food, and an increase in forced marriages. Now, this is not isolated to some of the Asian Pacific countries that we looked at. We also looked at similar trends in Somalia, in Africa, and in Colombia. Colombia is particularly an interesting case study, and I just want to highlight this. There was a law, or rather there was a court decision in Colombia that protected the river, Atrato River, in Colombia. Now, the women were deemed to be guardians of that river. Why? Because the women acknowledge that the river and natural resources have a right to protection and restoration. And so based on that, they train communities on conflict analysis, mediation, and project development, aim at preserving traditional knowledge and addressing environmental conflicts. And we see plenty of examples across the Asia-Pacific region. I know I'm running out of time, but I'd be more than happy to share with you the studies that we've done in this regard. Now, women as critical agents of resilience is clearly noted. Last year, for example, we invited Professor Rufa, who is a retired professor from the Mindanao State University, during the COP28 side event on What's Your Peace. And this is what she told the world in relation to what has been happening and what was the women's role in the Philippines. She said that in the Bangsamoro region of the Philippines, there were bouts of conflict, climate-related shocks such as flood. It is the women who work to ensure that assistance reaches the group most vulnerable and most in need. And she said that women often stepped up as peace facilitators in their communities, not really the men. But the leadership of women is often overlooked. Lastly, I wanted to speak a little bit about climate, peace, and security and the interlinkages with what we've been doing, the Women, Peace, and Security agenda. Now, why are we looking at the Women, Peace, and Security agenda? The Women, Peace, and Security agenda has always been to women's organizations, women CSOs, and also UN Women as a viable alternative to what we are seeing around the world, which is increased militarization and increased securitization, including on these emerging issues such as climate change. So that's the first reason why we want to look at the climate, peace, security nexus through the WPS agenda. The second reason is this: we don't have time, and the WPS agenda is an integrated framework. It is an inclusive framework. It is an established and widely accepted policy framework. We have 46% of the 110 national action plans globally that includes climate change in the national action plans on women, peace, and security. So more and more countries are picking up this issue and integrating it into their national action plans on women, peace, and security. ASEAN Regional Plan of Action refers to climate change as well, and ASEAN is actively looking at the Women, Peace, and Security agenda to ensure that we have an integrated climate action approach. The evidence also shows that countries that deliver on women, peace, and security in terms of women participation, access to justice, and security are not only more peaceful, but also better prepared to respond to the impacts of climate change. Lastly, and most importantly, the WPS agenda promotes what we call a multi-stakeholder approach and a whole of society approach to addressing systemic challenges. And what we noted is that the WPS agenda is bringing together sectoral approaches to climate action. They're bringing climate change actors and peace and security actors, particularly the security sector, together to look at an integrated approach. And this is what has been happening in places like Vietnam, in places like Cambodia, in places like Bangladesh. Timor-Leste in particular has a very specific agenda as well. Lastly, but most importantly, the WPS agenda, at the heart of it, promotes diversity and inclusion. It promotes women's leadership and participation, and it emphasizes the central role of communities. So for those reasons, we are of the view that the Women, Peace, and Security agenda is a viable alternative and might be, in many countries, the most viable alternative to looking at climate, peace, and security nexus. Thank you, Ajeng.
Thank you so much, Nurul, for really setting the scene as to why this is important and how we should approach this issue. Now, Your Excellency Eva Herzog, I'd like to ask you the next question. Thank you so much, first of all, for coming all the way to really bring an attention to this important issue in the Republic of Korea here. Can you please explain why Switzerland is seeking to really raise visibility and highlight this, the importance of this nexus? And could you share with us how the impacts of climate change and climate-induced natural disasters influence national and human security within and across nations around the world from your perspective?
Thank you very much, dear panelists, dear experts. I have to say, well, I think I could say now everything is said already so perfectly. Thank you very much for your introductory words, dear guests. What I could add perhaps is, yes, Switzerland is, you know perhaps that for 2 years Switzerland is an elected member of the Security Council of the UN. And it's one of the priorities, well, securing peace, climate change, and the important role of women in the Women, Peace and Security agenda is one of the priorities of my country. And our president of this year, Viola Amherd, who had the presidency of the council now in October. Switzerland had the presidency, and she emphasized on this subject of women, peace and security. And she had to say there in their speech, and I think this is the really awful thing, although we know that the participation of women in the peace agenda, in peace negotiation, peace building, is fruitful. Pieces hold longer when women are participate in the negotiation for peace. We know the important role of women, but there are always less women in these processes. They are threatened. It's dangerous for them to participate, and the violence against women all over the world has increased, and it's not. We know what we should have to do, but it's getting worse. And so I thank you very much for organizing. I thank the ambassador and UN Women to organize this panel today, because it's really also a subject of my heart to bring this further. And I thank the UN Secretary General, who is still working on the subject. I think it's important to do it in any position. And I would like to add that there have to be more women in any position to bring the subject further, because this is one point I think which makes it more possible that we live really progresses in this. What for me was until I don't know some years I thought more in the conflicts and the role the danger for women in conflicts and the role for peace building in wars, conflicts, but the climate change, which influences, the Nexus, I appreciate very much a discussion we have today. We have to look at it together. These subjects, they play together, and women and children, again, are the vulnerable group, more vulnerable groups in this process. And what can we do? We have to involve women. Nobody can say so good what are the necessities as we can do it by ourselves. But the important thing is that women are from the beginning involved in these processes, not when the house burns, then to call a woman and ask her how could we help, what could you do, but in building the house, in looking for the house, in the whole process, in the whole society, in the analysis of crises that are going on there, women have to play their role. It's easy saying it, but it's really it's the necessary to do. I can imagine by quotas, there is no financing of a project when women are not involved. And this, I think this is the role which we parliamentarians can have. We are giving at the end the finance for projects of different kind, and there we can formulate the conditions how these projects are having to be done.
Thank you so much, Your Excellency. I think you're right on. The expression, the token women, sometimes we can include one woman just to show that we included women, but that does not really change the status.
The quota woman. Can I add something to the quota woman? I am not against quota women. I think this is very important. I don't, in everything, be it in politics and economics, I don't want to wait so much longer until, we have to prove that we can do something. I think we have to have the places, we need quotas, we go there, and there's no doubt that we can do our job. And then the quotas, they can fall afterwards, later, when we are there. And then we don't need any quotas anymore. A quota is not only a negative thing.
Yes, Yes, definitely. So quotas and representation, forced representation of women is also very important as a starting point. At the same time, it's not enough. It's just to have reached that does not necessarily mean that we've really done the homework, right? So thank you so much, Your Excellency. Your point leads very nicely to the next question I was going to ask to Honorable Kang. As a member of National Assembly and through your lifelong career, to really ensure that the voices of marginalized groups are heard and reflected in decision-making, Honorable Kang, I wanted to ask you, what is the role of policy and lawmakers on really ensuring that women are represented, leading, and heard on these intersectional issues?
Yes, I'd like to share my experience as a woman, as relatively little in Korean society about this topic. I prepared for my manuscript in advance. May I read this one? Okay. I congratulate Ambassador Dagmar Schmidt Tartagli on the timely initiative discussing women at the Nexus of Climate, conflict, and peacebuilding. Given the increase of tensions worldwide, and in particular on the Korean Peninsula, it is necessary to raise awareness of this nexus. As today, I stand before you who are distinguished guests and champions of change, and not just to speak about climate change, but to highlight the transformative power of women's leadership. I recognize that UN Women has done important works on the conflict and peace building with agendas such as climate change and maternity risks, conflict prevention and resolution, women and peace building. It's very remarkable works and hope for your endless achievement in the future. Now, I'd like to focus on the nexus between women leadership and climate change. Let's consider this. In countless communities worldwide, it is women who are on the front lines of climate impact. They are the ones managing household, ensuring food securities, and support their families as droughts, flood, and changing weather patterns disrupt daily life. However, these same women are also the visionary who champion sustainable practices and advocate for solutions that heal the earth and uplift communities. Women bring perspectives rooted in empathy, inclusion, collaboration, and long-term thinking qualities that are crucial for addressing complex global challenges like climate changes. According to the OECD Environment Working Papers 2022, women's participation in environmental decision-making is important for advancing both gender equality and environmental action. In civil society, women around the world create powerful networks to combat environmental degradation and tackle climate-related inequalities. This presentation shows the existing evidence on women's environmental leadership in public governance, environmentally sensitive industries, and civil society, and its impact on environmental outcomes in these sectors. I'm a woman, and as an university professor, I was educating caretakers and teachers. In addition to the contents of special education, my major is special education, as she mentioned before. I held many seminars such as human rights education, disability sensitivity, and disability awareness education, as well as climate justice, ecological transformation education, and peace education. I was interested in the vulnerable while establishing educational policies and worked to close the educational gap and innovative educational reform for future generations. And I'm a woman, and as a leader of civil society, I was working directly with persons with disabilities. I had a strong interest in promoting inclusive policies during and after the Pyeongchang Paralympics. You know, Paralympics, especially designed for the persons with disabilities, like Olympics, you know. And I introduced a delegation to human rights groups for the children with disabilities, such as Human Aid and Angels Haven is the name of the organization for the persons with disabilities. I also initiated and helped organizing a visit of the EU ambassador to my university with extensive side program with the mayor of Iksan, the city where the university is located. I promoted exchanges with Europe and encouraging industries dealing with the climate crisis in Iksan. I am a woman, and as an active member of the Korean National Commission for UNESCO, I knew the impact of appreciate and the potential of the ideas embodied in the UNESCO, promoting peace, social justice, human rights, and international security through international cooperation on education, science, and cultural programs in implementing the SDGs. SDGs, you know. I'm a woman, and now, as a parliamentarian, it is my endeavor to contribute to the process of awareness, raising which in turn should lead to contribute to solving the underlying problems. Currently, I belong to Korea Rebuilding Party, in Korean, 조국 혁신당, that declared the vision of the environmental rights. Korea Rebuilding Party embodied the environmental rights as a social right of the people and to create an environmentally advanced country where the people can live with sufficient security and healthy environment. Korea Rebuilding Party is most interested in the climate crisis and climate justice agenda, which are biggest issues for future generations to live. Therefore, in order to build a new order and operating principle of the countries, I will start to amend the Article 35 of the Constitution, Environmental Rights Clause, and define it as a right enjoyed by everyone from the right to personal enjoyment. When women lead, people don't just inspire, people transform. And this is transformation that holds the key to a sustainable world for all. I appreciate the holistic view taken by the panel, combining the various threats, and I will strive as a parliamentarian to make contributions to all challenges on the table. Thank you for your dedication, your passion, and your commitment to making this vision a reality. Thank you again.
Thank you very much, Honorable Kang. Now we are going to move to the humanitarian context a little bit. We have the expert from the RCRC. Given RCRC's experiences with humanitarian crisis around the world, may I ask you, Ms. Shabar, what do you see on the ground in terms of the gendered impact of armed conflicts and how the climate crisis is affecting the dynamics of these conflicts, particularly for women?
Thank you very much. And thank you to all panelists. We definitely see that there is a gendered impact, and when we refer to gendered impact, we often talk about the diverse armed conflict and the impact on men, women, children, and boys and girls. So we're not necessarily only talking about women, but for today's panel discussion, we focus on women here. And when we talk about women, it's very important to note that it's not a homogeneous group. Different women experience conflict in different ways, and therefore some women may be fighters, others may be survivors, others might be peace builders. There are different roles in that context. But what we do see is that women do face certain risks or may be more vulnerable to certain risks during armed conflict, and those risks are diverse in nature. And I'll go through some of them that we do observe in the field. One of the first, and I think perhaps the most common and well-known, is the risk of sexual violence at the hands of arms bearers. And unfortunately, we do see that at an alarming rate and a shocking rate. But we also see the limited access to healthcare by women during armed conflict. And sometimes that unfortunately leads to preventable death, whether it's during childbirth or through other preventable diseases that could have been easily prevented. But these are also partly because women may not be able to access the facilities because they're no longer there, but also perhaps due to cultural, religious, or any other reasons, they may only be able to see other female medical practitioners, which may not be available or no longer available during armed conflict. An additional risk that is especially present at all times, especially in modern armed conflict, is displacement. So we do see there are additional vulnerabilities for women during and post-displacement. Often women are carers of children, usually more than men, and therefore they carry that additional responsibility. After displacement, they are often even economically poorer than men, which then leads them to vulnerabilities to being exploited, but also while they try to survive and find a living, it might be putting them in dangerous situation, whether it's through trying to source food or water or whatever it may be, that actually adds to the additional risks. Some women who are detained also face other risks. So they might be detained in the same quarters as men. They might be detained under men or male guards, which then, of course, puts them in an additional vulnerable position. Some women that go missing during armed conflict, and of course, many people go missing during armed conflict, but what we do find, interestingly, is that women that do go missing during armed conflict, they're not necessarily always recorded by authorities, which then can complicate the search and recovery operations, but also, interestingly, that also sways the gender data gap of data, and the data that you collect during armed conflict, that sways that data as well. Sorry. And one last observation, and actually we're next to the Digital Dilemmas exhibition here. Of course, the digital space is also a risk. Women's safety and dignity is threatened, through the digital risks, whether that's agenda disinformation or abuse. But of course, also there is a gap in gender literacy and in digital literacy, and that could also exacerbate certain risks, especially if certain information only circulates through certain digital means. Now, some of these risks are definitely further exacerbated by climate crisis, especially during displacement. So the displacement factor becomes even harsher when we add the climate factor. You mentioned some of the contexts that I worked in. A few of those are water-stressed nations, so you can also consider how that could actually impact how to source water from where, clean water, and so on and so forth. And that could put certain women in a more vulnerable position. Now, I have highlighted a number of risks and vulnerabilities, but as we observed in the field, it doesn't mean that there is actually there isn't a law that sort of protects women. Of course, there is the law of armed conflict, so international humanitarian law, which regulates how conflict is fought, how armed conflict is fought, and what rules can address certain vulnerabilities. There is a general protection of civilians, but actually also international humanitarian law tries to bridge the gap, in a nutshell, tries to prohibit discrimination and the treatment of women, including by requiring a due regard to be given to specific needs of women. And I'll give you a couple examples here of specifically when we talk about detention, actually, of women. So international humanitarian law has strict criteria that women are to be detained in separate quarters, they need female guards, and so on and so forth. So there's already measures in place. The issue oftentimes is compliance, respect, and implementation is what we find. And of course, international humanitarian law also prohibits rape and sexual violence. It is in fact a war crime if it happens during an armed conflict. And that's also prohibited against men, women, boys and girls. But at the end of the day, again, it goes back to this implementation and respect for the law that sometimes there is a gap. In view of these rules, aiming to avoid and reduce civilian harm, the key overarching recommendation of the ICRC is that incorporating a gendered perspective into the application and interpretation of IHL rules is a building block to progress and the alleviation of gendered harm, especially of the risks and vulnerabilities that we currently see in the field.
Thank you very much, Ms. Shabar, for outlining the humanitarian challenges. Now, I'm going to go to the climate financing side. I'm very grateful that we have Ms. Stephanie Speck from Green Climate Fund. I mean, despite so much progress that has been made, actually, to bring an attention to climate financing with a gender perspective, it seems that climate finance committed to activities that deliberately address this linkage of climate, peace, and security and gender as a principal objective is still rare. For instance, in 2021, only 56 activities out of more than 160,000 ODA-supported activities specifically addressed this nexus. This constitutes 0.035% of the total ODA-supported activities. So what's the status, do you see as an expert, in terms of integration of gender perspectives and conflict sensitivity into climate finance commitments across climate vertical funds? And how do you see that we can accelerate the progress that we've been making in terms of really integrating this perspective into climate financing?
It's a great question, and thank you very much for having me. I note we need to finish in about 3 minutes. I could be very brief and say we need more money in more places and more quickly, and that would be a succinct message. I'm always intrigued by the use of the word nexus in these discussions, because nexus conjures this image of a crossroads where we have the ability to go left or right. I prefer the word foundation. We must incorporate gender, and in particular the empowerment of women in discussions about peace and security and conflict, because actually the risk of conflict and fragility is growing. We have 39 countries sitting on the brink of fragility. 1 in 5 people in the world live within 5 kilometres of an active armed conflict today. And conflict and climate go after the same people. They go after the most vulnerable, the most marginalised, the poorest. And conflict and fragility together work to both amplify vulnerability to the negative impacts of climate change and therefore start a very vicious cycle of increased vulnerability to conflict. 15 of the top 25 countries that are most vulnerable to climate also sit on the World Bank's Fragile and Conflict Security Index. There is a strong correlation. It can no longer be ignored. And then if we overlay gender, the picture becomes even more worrying, because we see that women have been systematically, not accidentally, systematically underinvested in, underutilised, when they have significant scope to radically change the course of carbon emissions. So even though 1/3 of women's employment worldwide is in the agricultural sector, women represent only 12% of landowners. If this was reversed, so if all women smallholders received equal access to resources, farm yields would rise by 30%, another 150 million people would be fed, and CO2 emissions could be reduced by 2.1 gigaton. These are massive numbers from poverty through to climate. Women are actively limited in their ability to participate in decision-making and climate leadership. And although female entrepreneurship is growing around the world, male business owners still outnumber female business owners by 3 to 1. And yet, we know that businesses that have women on their board, where women-led firms have much higher, this is documented, social and environmental policies, financial resources, and leadership going to addressing climate. In fact, if there's a critical mass of women on an organisation's board, all aspects of performance improve. So climate action and gender action and conflict action go hand in hand. Now the Green Climate Fund, we're the largest multilateral climate fund. We have $16 billion committed at the moment and another $12 billion, although I'm anxiously looking at the results from the US election because that has a direct impact on our bottom line. We lose $4 billion if President Trump is re-elected. That takes away a quarter of our programming volume as the world's largest climate fund. It has real life impact and it will start the moment he is elected. So we are very anxiously watching what happens. Of course, we work hand in hand with the poorest countries to deliver on what they want, but the financial flow comes for developed countries. We were the first multilateral climate fund to have integrated gender action policy. You do not get investment from the Green Climate Fund unless you have conducted a gender assessment and unless you've also conducted a conflict-sensitive assessment. So when we are investing, we are confident that women's lives will be improved and there will be no unintended consequences around climate. That's to say, though, that those numbers at the beginning were still terrifying, right? They're still not enough. So the overriding message that let me finish up on this point is that we need to have more money going more quickly to the most vulnerable communities. That means that climate investment not just has to fund projects, but has to fund the capacity of countries, parliamentarians and governments to make climate positive and conflict positive decisions so that we can then come on board and fund those decisions. We provide every developing country around the world with a minimum of $4 million of capacity building money over 4 years. And we actively encourage countries to use that in making sure that the investment projects that they bring to us then for funding are in fact really positively and proactively including and advancing women's empowerment and inclusion, and also making sure addressing conflict and fragility issues in their neighbourhoods. Let me finish on that. There's a lot of money at stake. There needs to be more. And it's our job as Green Climate Fund with other climate funds to make sure that it gets to the last mile to address these really critical issues. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Stephanie. Simon, I think we started 10 minutes late, so can we have 10 more minutes? Yes, audience, please? Yes, thank you very much. I'm going to shift the order just a little bit, if you allow me. Stephanie, let me actually ask you the next question, because I think it links very nicely. You addressed the first question from the climate financing perspective, and there are quite a few people here gathered here who are working in the development communities. So what can we do as development partners and development partners and ODA providers in terms of really accelerating our integration of these issues? A little bit of general recommendation can you provide us with?
Well, in 5 days, the world meets in Baku, in Azerbaijan, and it's being called the Climate Finance COP. The world will make a terrible acronym, NCQG, a newly collective quantified goal. You may remember in the Paris Agreement, and Mr. Moon was instrumental in this, the world pledged $100 billion annually in additional finance to climate. There are different ways of measuring that, and there's some skepticism about whether that's ever been reached. We have the chance now in 6 days to get it right this time. The volumes sound extraordinary. Trillions of dollars needed to go into this. In shrinking domestic fiscal space, where public support for countries spending their tax money on climate is actually shrinking. So the most important thing that can happen now is that people who are at COP negotiating on behalf of countries make very concrete pledges. And they're pledges that recognise both the urgency and scale and do not shy away. We have 4 years to keep the world's temperature at 1.5. IPCC 2 weeks ago released a report that said, in fact, we're more likely to hit 3 degrees. Southern Europe becomes a desert. You cannot raise cattle in Africa. Sweden and other countries will not be able to launch military ships because actually military bases installments no longer function. The world is, as Mr. Moon said, is at a crisis point. And the scale of finance and the pledges that are made in Baku need to realise that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think this links very nicely with what Noro said, that we don't have time. And the situation is not looking good on many fronts when it comes down to peace and security, and also on gender equality. There's been a lot of pushbacks actually we've been experiencing. So despite a lot of good work that's been going on, the status is not looking all too good. So I think that we really need to come away with a sense of urgency and crisis and really mobilize our efforts. So thank you very much. Now I'm going to ask the role of how we can actually really make sure that we hear the voices of the marginalized groups and the women's groups and the communities in role. So I just want to ask you the next question, because we talk a lot, oh, we need to hear the voices of women. That's almost like cliche nowadays in a way, but how can we really do this, especially in multilateral systems and very complex systems of development and climate-related actions? How do you see we can really hear the women and ensure that they are capacitated so that their voices can truly influence our project designing and decision-making role?
Thank you very much, Jung. So very briefly, and picking up from, where you have very nicely articulated the issue around financing and investing and amplifying feminist leadership. I think that's really, really important. There is a fund, the Peace Humanitarian Fund, that was set up many years ago by UN Women. Is based in Geneva right now. It's doing really well. It has a specific windows. Recently, it launched a window on climate, peace, and security. The whole purpose of the fund is to build the institutional capacity of women grassroots leaders and women civil society organizations, particularly in fragile, difficult, complex contexts. And secondly, to allow them some money to do programming and support their efforts at the local level. This institutional building is really important. Why? Because it does allow them a foot up, if you like, to speak with policymakers, decision makers at the national, regional, and global level, but they do need support in order to get there, right? So it is important to invest in them with a view to them being this sort of a global change makers, if you like, and not just some small civil society organization working at the grassroots level. They have a lot of potential, and we need to find them and invest in them. The second thing is really to give them that opportunity to be a part of national or rather global debates, right? The COP28, for example, we brought in women with disabilities, peace builders with disabilities, so that they can influence the world, on how to look at these issues with the specific needs of women in mind, for example, from a diverse group. Otherwise, policymakers at the international level, really, they tend to see some things in black and white, and you do need to bring these women who do not have PhDs in climate change. They're not, they're not experts who've gone to school, with a degree in climate change, but they know so much about adaptation, mitigation, what are the drivers of conflict. You just need to talk to them and work with them and give them that opportunity and that space at the international level. So bring them as speakers, for example, as briefers to UN Security Council members, which is what UN Women has been doing for a very long time. And this really give them that opportunity and visibility as well. So those are some of the examples. There are many, many examples, but the point is to take them out of the, of the spaces where they are invisible and bring them into the spotlight.
Thank you. And in order to bring them to the spotlight, we need deliberate action, and we also need to spend our money. I think that's the thing. And it is worth spending the money, right? So I think that's a key message. Now, let me go back to Ms. Shabar, because I really want to just really hear from you. What do you think is the role of the humanitarian action, particularly in this changing landscape of security and peace, in order to build the resilience of the communities and women to respond to these crises?
Thank you. Some of you may know that in May 2021, the ICRC adopted the Climate and Environment Charter for Humanitarian Organizations. And it's highlighting ICRC's commitment, and it was a charter for all humanitarian organizations that can sign up to it. Following that, the ICRC then actually implemented a plan of action from 2021 and beyond, and how to implement it. And the three focus areas for us, 3 focus areas for us. And they are interconnected. And the first one is integrating climate and environmental risks in our programs, reducing the ICRC's environmental footprint, and conducting policy and legal development and engagement on climate and environment. And if I just focus on the first one, because that's the programmatic development phase, that can, I guess, unfold in different phases. It could go from sustainable agricultural programs for affected communities to consultation and sustainability-led action through by local communities, accountability to affected population to ensure that whatever design is actually working and meeting those objectives. But of course, also it has to be through, again, if we go back to this gender perspective lens, the two also have to happen in parallel, because sometimes the consultations, as we've heard, could only focus on men and so on and so forth. And it was just worth noting that it's actually it dates back to 1999, during the 27th International Conference of the Red Cross and Red Crescent, that actually ICRC made a pledge to make sure that their programs will have a gendered perspective. So you can imagine from 1999, that was already an issue, and we still continue to talk about it. And now you just add a layer of the climate perspective, and these have to happen in parallel, and just to make sure that they all get carried out in the field effectively.
Thank you so much. Now I'd like to ask Your Excellency Eva Herzog, going back to the role of Parliament in terms of shaping the policies and our priorities, and also the financing aspects of it as well. Your Excellency, what is your recommendation in terms of the approach that governments and national assemblies need to take in ensuring that policies and programs really integrate gender perspectives and the climate sensitivity into our program of action?
Yeah, thank you. As I said before, I think you have to integrate women into projects. You do have to do projects for women. Women have education for women, possibility for women to have, that it's not too dangerous to go to school, that it's that for girls that you have enough education, that you have a knowledge about your rights, your possibilities, and the power to raise your voice. This in the project, and this is our responsibility to look what are we financing. You said it very well before. If we finance projects, it's not the project, but it's the capacity building, the sustainability of the projects. That it's all about knowledge and education. After the basic needs of clear water and the basic needs and nurture, and then. women in the deciding positions. Women have to be in the right places. Women have to be integrated everywhere. And I only can add. You said how less time we have to do really something against climate change, and we don't have time to wait until enough women are in the right positions. And so perhaps. I don't know what you think, but I think it's quicker with quotas. It's quicker when it is a condition that there is a percentage of women in every institution, in every project, because the women are here. We are not quota women in a negative sense. We are here. We have our capacities, and not every man who is in a position came there because of his capacities, but because society gives him the position. And I think we have to think it that way. And society, we can't wait until images in societies are changing slowly. Women have to prove what they can do. We made a visit yesterday. We were at the Iwa Women's University in Seoul. I was impressed. It was wonderful. It was great. And I think we need this also, women in a place where they can make the experience that they can do everything. They can study every branch, be it languages, history, political science, or natural sciences and quantum physics. And this empowerment of women, in every country. In Switzerland, I invited 350 women came for the Day of Women in March, came to the federal building, to the parliament in Switzerland. And we were so excited it was a good atmosphere, and we felt the necessity that we have to do it, because it's still necessary. And these events, we have to do it, but it's not quickly enough, so we need legislation and conditions in the projects.
Thank you so much. Now we are running out of time, so I'm going to ask the first question to Honorable Kang. Honorable Kang, I really appreciated how you actually elaborate on the benefits of having women's leadership. You know, women not only as the victims, but also as powerful agents of change, and then it pays off to have women's leadership, I gathered from your earlier remarks. So what is your final recommendation, Honorable Kang, may I ask, in terms of the policymakers? You know, how can we advance the three interrelated goals in terms of peace and security, you know, climate action, and gender equality together?
Yes, very good question. To advance the interrelated goals, the policymakers' role is very, very crucial, right? and must recognize and address the deep connections between these areas to create strategies and opportunities for synergy, right? Mm-hmm. Therefore, I can recommend to policymakers to adopt for climate action, gender equality, and peace and security. For climate action, first, gender-responsive climate policies are needed. Because climate policies account for gendered impact by integrating gender analysis and disaggregated data into all stages of policy design, implementation, and monitoring. This helps create interventions that are inclusive and responsive to the needs of women and other marginalized groups. Second, a policymaker can empower women in climate adaptation and mitigation through investment in capacity building programs for women in climate vulnerable communities, providing them with training, funding, and access to green technologies. For gender equality, at first, the policymakers should support women's leadership in peace and climate initiatives. Women play critical roles in community resilience, yet they are often educated from leadership in climate and security sectors. Secondly, policymakers should enhance the legal and economic protections for women. Gender equality laws, property rights, and financial inclusion for women are vital for strengthening resilience. Thirdly, policymakers should invest in education and skill development for women, such as training and education for women and girls in fields like environmental science, renewable energy, and peace buildings. The last one, for peace and security, policymakers should consider to integrate environmental and climate considerations in peace building. Climate stressors such as water scarcity and crop failure often make worse conflicts. The peace building efforts should address these stressors directly by promoting sustainable resources, management, and climate resilience within post-conflict and fragile states. Lastly, I highly recommend the policymaker to engage in partnership with civil society and international organizations like this. Civil society organizations and international partners often have the resources, experiences, and reach to support government initiative. A partnership can help to sustain projects that address these interlinked issues, especially in high-risk regions. Yes, that's all. my comment.
Thank you very much, Honorable Kang. Now, I think this concludes the panel discussion. We are sorry that we ran slightly over time. We ask for your kind understanding. I'm very grateful for the audience today, and I also want to recognize men participants in this gathering as well, because we often attend discussions concerning gender, and we only see mostly women. And I'm very grateful that we have a lot of male participants here in this room as well, because this is not women's issue, but this is our issue. This is our future issues. So thank you so much for being here and really taking an attention to this important issue. I'd like to sincerely thank Ambassador Dagmar Schmidt, of course, for kindly offering us to co-organize this event. And I'd like to thank our distinguished panelists, Ms. Shavar, Your Excellency Eva Herzog, Honorable Kang, Ms. Rashid, and Ms. Speck. And thank you so much for sharing your expertise and your passion for this work. And thank you for everyone for being with us today. So thank you.